Now, he's averaging, now, and this was 2 or 3 years ago, he's now over 8% organic matter, okay? His water infiltration rates are now over 10 inches per hour, okay? They never get a 10 inches in an hour up there. So every bit of rainfall that falls on his farm and ranch, it stays right there. And he's been able to reduce his fertilizer use on his row crops by 90% and his herbicide use by 88%, okay? He uses a lot of cocktail cover crop mixes and livestock impact. He rotates row crops with cocktail cover crops and livestock, okay? He calls them biological primers. This is an example of some of the diversity in his cocktail cover crop mixes. Last year we used a mix that was over 74 different species. We went really diverse, okay? But we like to use a minimum of a dozen or more different species in the cocktail mixes. And again, we want a mix of grasses, legumes, and forbs. And we use a lot of brassicas like hybrid turnips and grazing radishes and all of those types of things to help build the soil.
How in this cocktail mix, is this something he's planting annually?
Yes, but now you got to remember he's doing a row crop livestock rotation, okay? Right. Now he does have some permanent pastures that are rangeland, but where he's doing row crops, because he's a farmer as well, okay? So where he's doing row crops, then he's putting in cocktail cover crop mixes, livestock impact, multi-species now, and then follow that back up with row crops and repeating that process.
Would you suggest that even if you weren't doing row crops, it would still probably help, or would the organic? I mean, if you didn't do row crops every year, you would still do that.
Yeah, let's.
I would do like turnips or something. And then
Yeah.
pigs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to show some things in a minute. Let's bring that up again. This is an example of a cover crop seed mix, okay? This is at Gabe's place. This is ultra high stock densities and a cool season cocktail cover crop mix. And you can see he's just moving them forward at ultra high stock density, okay? This is what has happened, okay? When we compare the high microbial activity fields that we've been able to build using these strategies up at Gabe's place versus low microbial activity fields on neighboring ranches, this is the difference. The forage dry matter production is increased from 2,500 pounds to over 8,500 pounds, okay, per acre. The crude protein went up significantly. The TDN went up significantly, okay? Just by having high microbial activity versus low, okay? That's the difference that it makes in production. Here's what he's been able to do in his corn production, all right? He's been able to reduce, through these strategies, he now has reduced his cost per bushel of corn produced to $1.32. He's making money at $3 corn. The average corn farmer in the U.S., what's their break even per bushel? $4.50. $4.50. His break even's $1.30. Okay? Wheat, his break even's $1.88. You know, wheat's what, $5.50 to $5.60 right now? Okay? That's low from where it's been, so he's making good money with wheat still. All right? This is winter bale grazing. We've used this a lot to build rapid soil organic matter, or to rapidly build soil organic matter. It's very easy to do up north where your ground freezes and we can place the bales, pre-place them in a checkerboard fashion prior to winter, and then just put up poly wire and allow the cattle so much access each day to so many bales of hay each day, okay? Winter bale grazing can rapidly build. That's what you want to see left after each bale. Don't put them in hay rings. Do not put them in hay rings, okay? That defeats the purpose. All right, you want them to be able to scatter it out, okay, as they bale graze. That's the result that you want to see around each bale. This is bale grazing in Nova Scotia. Okay, you can see that the cattle are allowed a row of bales each day. Okay, and then look what's left behind. When the spring thaw comes, that's going to be an incredible source of new soil organic matter. Okay, that's the kind of residue we want left behind. Now, a lot of people say, my goodness, you're wasting a lot of hay. No, I'm not. I'm building soil. Exactly.
A bale of hay is worth $90 if you spread it out and let it. Is that the number? I saw that at a seminar recently.
If you spread it,
Like a bale of hay, square bale, spread it out and let it.
it's more like $150.
Is that $100? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, this warm season cocktail mix example. This is what the seed mix looks like. In the bottom picture there, you can see the different varieties that were used prior to the corn crop that's in there now. Okay, so that was to build fertility for the subsequent corn crop.
Do you have a recipe around here?
Yes, we do.
Some of the stuff that's in it?
Yeah. We custom design, now we don't sell them. You know, we have sources that you can go to, but we custom design mixes for our clients. Yeah.
I'm still hung up on the snow picture with all the hay bales. I noticed you place a lot of hay bales out there.
Yeah.
You said in a checkerboard fashion.
Yep.
Okay, so I have mine on a wagon, and I move the wagon every day with the cows. Even during the winter, I move every day.
Okay.
Spread the manure. Next time through that field, it's over a little bit, so I can cover all of mine. Would you use more hay that way? You're ending up with more hay on the ground than me. That's what you're doing. Because they're eating more of mine. Okay.
Yeah.
You're ending up with more on the ground.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure the
Yeah.
difference in the two.
But I want that hay on the ground.
Alan, was the system you showed, was that more like for high density purposes?
This, yes, this allows you to concentrate those cows in the winter. Now, when we're wet down here in the winter and muddy, you don't want to do this. Okay? You don't want to do this. All right? Because you'll puck up your ground like crazy. But in where the ground freezes in these northern climates, this works extremely well. And in drier environments, it works well. You know, I'm dry enough right now where I'm at, I could bale graze right now. Okay? But when we start getting December rains, I probably won't want to do it.
Can you do this bale grazing technique and accomplish the same purpose for the soil as you were doing with the grazing? I mean, just using the bale grazing
Yeah, yeah,
technique?
yeah.
How about unrolling?
Yeah, unrolling it's fine, as long as you get the densities. It's fine, yeah. And we'll do some of both here. When it gets a little wetter, I'll unroll it.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
It would seem like you, and I'm just speculating, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but it would seem like it would be less labor intensive to do it in the winter because you wouldn't be having to move your cattle
Right.
12
You
times a day,
right.
but you would get that same input.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And all the bales are preset, so you're not hauling hay out every day in the wintertime. All you're doing is moving a single strand of polywire, and the cows are moving forward to the hay. Yeah. So it works very well. This is a cocktail cover crop mix at Gabe Brown's, a summertime warm season. And this has more than two dozen different species in it, but you can see the height of this. You know, that's Gabe there peeking out. Now, this particular pasture, I wanted to show you this. Last year, to the right, they mob grazed, and to the left, they didn't. Can you see the difference? Okay, pretty dramatic difference. Okay, when you got out and you measured actual dry matter production and availability, it was very, very different. Okay, this was much more productive than this. And so just the difference between mob grazing or ultra high stock density and not. Now this I wanted to show you. You see that green strip? Okay. Last year, what he did was that's where he grew his potatoes. And he does no-till potatoes. He takes the eyes, the cut eyes, and just throws them on the ground, just broadcasts them on the ground, and then takes bales of hay and rolls the bales of hay out over top. And that's it. And the potatoes grow wonderfully, beautifully. And to harvest them, you don't have to dig, you just have to lift the hay, and they're right there. Okay? That's where he grew the potatoes. Look at the difference in fertility.
How much field of acres of potatoes you talking about there?
Well, right there, I mean, that's probably no more total than an acre. Yeah.
Could you leave those, do sweet potatoes, all potatoes, and just let the cows come along and eat them?
You can. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Concerning small ruminants, grazing sheep, meat sheep. Okay, when you're talking about the grazing, the practice on our farm, rotation grazing is better than we do in the paddock. So here you was talking about growing the grasses up, I guess like chest high.
No. Just it depends on the forage species, but just let them grow.
Okay.
Okay,
Since you said,
yeah.
you mentioned about universities, that how your experience with universities can mention one thing, but you found in your experience
Right.
it's better. Okay. When I went to the workshop and they said that have them to graze like for 6 inches before I actually rotate them to rotate them to the another pasture. My question is, I know that the tall grass is very sufficient, it is, but for small room I can't have it that high because the sheep is not going to actually eat it that high. They will turn away from it. So in your experience, how high you think you should have it with small ruminants to
If you have my answer to that is if you have a monoculture, you're right. If you have a polyculture, doesn't matter. Because with polycultures, you have stories. You have multiple different forage types, from the grasses to the legumes to the forbs, and they grow in stories. And the sheep will move through and will graze the understory.
okay.
Absolutely. You have no problem with that. I'll show you some pictures in a minute.
Last question here.
Yep.
I have an area.
Uh-huh.
Actually, when it's springtime, only grows nothing but clover. I know I can have my sheep to actually graze over there because it'll cause bloating. But the other grasses would not come up at all. So I wanted to implement something like no-till, or maybe I can broadcast, have Gabe Brown, since you said you know him, have he had a type of grass that was so invasive that, such as like the clover, what did he do actually, but not tilling now, I'm talking about like broadcasting to bring other grasses up, because the Bermuda, the grass, nothing will come up, only, it'll be dead, and then but when it comes spring, summer, then these clovers come up in this area. And I want to correct that pasture as a good grazing area. I can't do nothing with it. I mean, I did soil tests and everything.
Well, one of the problems with the prevalence of clover, that much clover, is that the pasture probably was overgrazed prior, and that allowed the clover to become dominant. Okay, so to correct that, what you can do is after the and you may have to have a period of time where you allow once it starts warming up, the clover starts to slow down in its growth, then the grasses will start coming up, okay? And then you can graze it and control it. But while you've got predominantly clover, you may have to put out some dry bales of hay to allow them some grass roughage consumption, so that they don't overeat, overconsume, and bloat on the clover. Okay? So supplement them on that. Okay, this is moving through the cocktail forage mixes. I'm going to move through some stuff rather quickly now, because I do want to get to some things that I want to emphasize here. Again, a cool season cocktail. This is when it's first planted, starting to come up. You can see we got a mix of grass, forbs, legumes, all of those types of things in here. This is before grazing. This is making a new move. Okay, here we go. We talked about the amount of trample, okay? And you don't want to bush hog this, but this is, you see that trample? That's what you want. That's what you're aiming for, okay? And no, you don't want to bush hog that. You want to leave it just like it is. That's perfect for new organic matter growth and for protecting the soil. So that's what you're aiming for, but you see we still have a lot of biomass left there, right? We didn't harm, we didn't have root growth stoppage and all that. It's just laid down, okay? So that's what we're looking for. This is winter stockpile grazing. Now, that's the nutrient value on what they're grazing right there that day. It looks dead, doesn't it? Looks dead. But that's the nutrient value as it stands there that day. Okay? Pretty good. Okay, they'll keep gaining like that. That's the nutrient value of the hairy vetch standing there in the mid of winter. That's the nutrient value of the graza radishes. Okay? There in the dead of winter. Okay, we took a farm up in Prairie 5 years ago. We started on this particular one. It had been farmed for more than 200 years straight and then 20 plus years in CRP. What happens in Mississippi when something's in CRP that long? Both. Right. Yeah, it had everything you could imagine on it, you know, from weeds to briars to brambles to brushy species, woody species, a lot of ash, bodock, you know, honey locust, da-da-da-da-da. All right, so that's what the open areas look like the very first year. We purchased it in the fall, and that was the pasture that we had, okay? Not much there, huh? Okay, so what we did that first winter was we bale grazed, okay? And then we started implementing adaptive high stock density grazing. That's what cow-calf pairs grazed on that farm the first grazing season. What do you see there? Weeds. Yeah, weeds. Ragweed, giant ragweed, pigweed, ironweed, this weed, that weed, every weed, okay? That's what they ate. And these are lactating cows, excuse me, cows with calves, lactating cows. That's what they ate, okay? We mobbed them through that whole summer. They stayed fat the whole summer. We never lost body condition. They gained body condition. Eating weeds, okay? Eating weeds. Why?
Because the weeds, you gotta give out some great nutrients too.
Most weeds are what? Deep-rooted, aren't they? Okay, that's why they survive in tougher periods, droughts and all that. If they're deeper rooted, they're reaching down and collecting minerals that the more shallow-rooted plants cannot. So they were more highly mineralized than the grass species growing in there. So they would eat these weeds. That's what the ragweed and ironweed would look like when we'd come out of a paddock. You see how they'd strip the stalks bare of the leaves? They'd eat all the leaves. They loved them. They got to where and even today, and you'll see the difference now, I'm fixing to show you pictures, but even today where they find ironweed and ragweed, they'll go after those first and still eat those leaves. So they remember that, okay? All right, this is the second year of grazing. You see the difference in just a single year of grazing, mob grazing? Okay, so now we're starting to see a lot more diversity in actual forage species, right? Starting to come up. Okay, that's the third year. That's the fourth year. Okay, 4 years. That's what we went from. You remember that first picture? Okay. Yes, sir.
And that's just a result of the process of awakening the latent seed bank?
Yes. I got some data here. Let's see if it's in the next slide. Yeah, here we go. In 4 years, we tripled our stocking rate. We increased our predominant forage species, not weed species, but actual forage species, from no more than 3 to 4 to more than 35 today. We now have documented, and we have witnesses, expert witnesses to this, but we have Indian grass big blue stem, little blue stem, gamma grass, eastern gamma, Illinois bundleflower, a lot of other stuff. And of course we have Bermuda grasses, Dallas grass, crab grasses, Johnson grass, many, over a dozen different species of legumes, okay, and a lot of forbs, plantains, docks, dandelion, all of that, which cattle love, all livestock love, and they thrive on it, okay? So that's what we have now. If we had used a lot of herbicides, we would have killed a lot of those favorable species coming in, okay? We didn't plant the native tallgrass species. They came up from the native seed bank. They haven't been seen in that area of our state for more than 200 years. Yeah. And it's amazing. All of a sudden, they were there. And I mean, I can't explain it. It's just like one day they weren't, and the next day, boom, I'm looking at bluegrass. Blue stem, you know. Yeah.
I was interested in, you made this answer, how gradual over that 4 years did it go from 3 or 4 species to 35? Or did it get
We added about close to a dozen each year on the average. And then, and like I said, with some of the species, it was like, it literally was almost like overnight. I mean, I would drive into pastures and then, like I said, all of a sudden, I'm looking at blue stem, and I'm looking at Indian grass, and I'm looking at Illinois bundleflower, and it's like, wait a minute, that wasn't here yesterday. You know, it's that amazing. We increased our organic matter from 1.5% to 4.3% in 4 years. Okay, we increased the bricks in our plants 400%, improved all of these other things. Las Damas Ranch, yeah.
This might be inappropriate to say, but there's a certain university in our state that is an ag university. And I went to an experiment that they were doing near your place in Prairie.
Yep.
On native grasses.
Yep.
And they wanted you to burn it off with
Right.
herbicides, I think,
Right.
twice.
Right.
And this was 2 or 3 years ago. I heard the other day that their experiments were failing.
They are.
Blue stem, little blue stem weren't working.
I've got a lot more than they do, and I'm right next door to them, and I didn't plant it, okay? I didn't burn anything, and I didn't plant it. But yeah, I'm well aware of their experiment there, and yeah. But,
If you burn it off with the Roundup, you're killing all the roots.
right, exactly.
Oh, after you burned it off, you had to spend a small fortune
Right.
buying the seed.
Right, right. And then you had to let it basically lay there without livestock impact for the first 2 years to allow it to establish itself. And yet, I've grazed it every year, and it's there, you know. So, now this is an example of what happens in a very fragile environment. Now, we've talked about what we consider to be good environments, you know, like Nova Scotia, North Dakota, and Mississippi. What about when you get in a very fragile environment? This is Las Damas Ranch. This is one of our, we've got a group of holistic ranchers that we work with in Mexico that are doing an outstanding job in north central Mexico and the Sierra Madre range. So it's high mountain desert, implementing these exact same adaptive high stock density grazing principles, and this is what they've achieved, okay? Las Damas Ranch, Neighbors Ranch. 5 years ago, there was no difference from one side of the fence to the other. All of it looked like the Neighbors Ranch, every bit of it, okay? Las Damas. The only problem that they have on Las Damas, and that's Octavio Bermudez, the only problem that they have is that somehow the fences keep getting cut between their ranch and the neighbor's ranch. And the neighbor's cattle get on their ranch. So, all right, so here's what happened. Over the last 4 years, they average 11 inches a year, but the last 4 years they've had 10, 9, 8, and 5 inches a year rain. That's it. Okay, when they first started 5 years ago, they were predominantly a monoculture of tabasa grass. Now they have over 3 dozen different species growing there. They now can run 1 cow-calf per 40 acres. 5 years ago, it was 1 per 200 acres. which is what their neighbor's still running. Okay? So here we go, another example. We talked about Gabe Brown's neighbor that has done nothing different. Now we got a neighbor here that has done nothing different other than wanting to use the Las Almas Ranch. Okay? So, it's hard to explain. All right, here's examples in different states, different regions, the rapidity at which we've been able to build soil organic matter on clients' farms and ranches. Just look at that. That's pretty quick, folks. A lot quicker than that million years, or 1,000 years, or even 100 years, right? A lot quicker. That's real measurements in a real time span. All right, here's the reason you keep the ground covered. Okay, same day, soil temperature on bare ground 91 degrees, on covered ground 77 degrees. Here, where we have shaded ground 87 degrees, 107 degrees on the bare ground. Okay, here's why it's important. When soil temperature is 70 degrees, our microbes thrive, and 100% of the soil moisture is available for plant growth and regrowth. Okay? At 100 degrees soil temperature, 85% of our soil moisture is lost, and only 15% is available for plant growth and regrowth and soil microbial support. Okay? Microbes are like us, they have to have water. Okay? At 115 degrees, our microbes start to break down. At 140 degrees, they're gone. They're dead. Okay? All right. We work with Audubon. We've established bird-friendly grazing practices for them that they're now using, particularly for ground nesting birds throughout the Great Plains region, extending from Canada down into Mexico. And I'll be out in Colorado next week working with Audubon all week doing workshops, helping ranchers implement these bird-friendly grazing practices. This is an example of purposefully leaving certain habitat for ground nesting birds. We've got to have brooding habitat, nesting and brooding habitat, okay? And then protective habitat, and then food habitat. We can leave all of that through our grazing strategies. And those different areas can rotate around the ranch each year, okay? Because the birds will find it. The birds will find it. All right, again, bird-friendly grazing, leaving different stories of habitat available for the birds. This is what we can do with bird-friendly grazing, being able to significantly increase bird population. We also are working with Trout Unlimited using grazing practices to improve our trout fisheries, our trout streams, okay? We've been very successful with this throughout the upper Midwest and the West. And this is an example of improper grazing of livestock around streams, where they have continuous access and can create erosion and all of these other things, okay? That's what you don't want to do. But with proper grazing practices, adaptive high stock density, own in high stock densities, but for a very short duration, and then move to the next section, next section, next section. We've been able to recreate and rebuild trout streams, okay? This is an example of a complete stream restoration in Wisconsin. On this particular picture, in between those two pictures is a road and a bridge. I stood on the bridge and took a picture this direction of using our grazing principles. This other direction is land owned by the state and managed by the state wildlife and fisheries. Okay? Where are all the trout? They're over here. They're not over there. We are crowded by willows and alders and everything else over there. The stream is narrowing up and deepening. We no longer have good trout habitat. Okay? The trout have moved this direction where we've got the grazing. And that's just another example of coexisting between livestock grazing and fishing. Bricks, how many people know what bricks is? Okay. Bricks has been used for many, many years in the fruit and vegetable sector. to measure plant sugars particularly, but also it's a measure of total nutrient density in a plant, okay? So the higher the Brix, the more nutrient dense that plant is. We use simple instruments called refractometers to measure it. You can do this on your own pastures. You can buy one for 100, 120 bucks, okay, and routinely measure Brix. Here's why it's important. You can have the same forages that are low Brix or high Brix. Animal performance is going to be significantly higher when they're high Brix. It doesn't matter the forage type, okay? Forage type doesn't matter. When you're finishing livestock on pasture, this is a very important thing to remember. What do they need to finish? To lay down marbling, to lay down back fat. What do they need? Okay, they need energy, right? That comes in the form of carbohydrates and sugars, okay? So early maturity pastures, when they're very highly vegetative and lush, are not finishing pastures. They're not. We make that mistake all the time. We think those are finishing pastures because they look so good. They're not. We don't want them we don't want them real lush for finishing. Why? Because your protein to carbohydrate, protein to energy ratio is way out of whack. Your proteins are too high, energy's too low. You want to wait till those pastures are mid-stage of maturity or slightly beyond. That's your sweet spot for balancing protein to energy and properly finishing all species of livestock, okay? Beef, cattle, sheep, goats, okay? Doesn't matter. That's your sweet spot. That's where you want your forages to be before you turn them into the new paddock, okay? All right, Brix is important because it improves animal performance, plant health. It confers drought resistance and freeze and frost tolerance in your plants, okay? How do animals know whether a plant is high Brix or low Brix? What's the chief method of determining that for an animal? A deer, say, or a cow, or a goat. Aroma, okay? It's like this. I grew up in South Carolina. I told you that at the beginning today, and South Carolina at that time was the leading state in the United States for fresh peach production. Okay, we had peach orchards everywhere. All right, so I grew up around peach orchards. Now, in those days, when peaches were ripening, you knew they were ripening because you smelled the peach orchard from miles away, okay? And when you bit into those peaches, they were soft, they were juicy, so juicy that the juice dribbled down your chin, dribbled down your hand and forearm, right? Okay? What about the peaches you buy in grocery stores today? Okay? First of all, you go to a produce section in a grocery store and what do you smell? Nothing, that's right. What's wrong with that? When you go into a produce section, your senses should be assaulted by smells. Okay? You should smell the watermelons and the cantaloupe and the lettuce and the cucumbers and the tomatoes and the peaches. They don't have any Brix. They're low in Brix, so they're low in nutrient density. So when I get a grocery store peach, first of all, I can put it all the way up my nose and not smell any peach aroma. And secondly, I could take the darn thing and bean you upside the head with it and knock you out. It's rock hard, okay? Or if I bite into it, I might chip a tooth, okay? So that's what we're talking about. And here's why Brix in your forages is so important. Again, everybody asks all the time, what forage species is best for finishing livestock? It doesn't matter. Build the Brix in the forage, whatever you've got out there, and you'll finish livestock on them. And here's why. Okay? If your Brix is 5% or less, you'll get 1 pound per day average daily gain or less. And that's all you can tease out of that forage. Okay? That's it. Do you know what the average Brix in most pastures around the entire United States is? 2 to 5. 2 to 5. Okay? When you get Brix up to 15% or greater, now your average daily gains are in the high 2s to 3s. Okay? Here's a rule of thumb. For every 1% increase in Brix, you add 1/10 to 3/10 of a pound average daily gain. So your grazing tips, know your dry matter availability in your pastures before you turn your cattle in. Allow 3 to 3.5% forage dry matter intake per day, per animal, okay? For finishing only, don't let them take more than the top 30%. Follow them up with another species or with cows or with stockers, okay, to get down to your 50%. But let your finishing animals take no more than the top 30% and move them forward, okay? Move forward rapidly. Know the Brix content before you turn them in. Make sure it's optimum at its peak. Also, never turn them into a new paddock before early afternoon. Don't turn them in the mornings. Why? Because the Brix fluctuates throughout every 24-hour cycle. It's at its peak in the tips of the leaves and the blades of the plant by early to mid-afternoon. Turn them into every new paddock. At that time, they'll be eating the highest Brix content every 24-hour period. That's what you want. They'll get the highest. Just that one strategy alone will add another ½ pound a day average daily gain. Just the one strategy alone, okay? So turn them into new paddocks early to mid-afternoon, and remember that stage of maturity of your forage. Mid-stage or slightly beyond before you turn them in gives you the peak energy to protein ratio for proper finishing, okay? All right, we're going to skip through those. This is different types of setup for doing your fencing, just to give you some ideas. Now, we all sometimes have help, right? Whether it's our kids, whether it's people that we hire to help us or whatever, but sometimes that help does this to you. You know, you just want to say, boy, you're exceeding the limits of my medication. Yeah, so we still have to deal with people. Here's another rig. This is my rig. That's how I've rigged my Ranger up for fencing.